Hey, I'm Shawn Kanungo. This is another episode of Dangerous Ideas. We break down concepts and frameworks that will change your life. Hey everyone, this is another episode of Dangerous Ideas. My name is Shawn Kanungo, and in this podcast, what we do is we break down concepts and frameworks that will change your life. It'll change your career, will change your business, but most importantly, it will change your life. And as you can see, we are starting to figure out what this studio is going to look like. And I'm going to be honest with you, we're not completely there yet. We're like 80%, but every single day, you're going to see a slight improvement, 1% every single day. We got, 3 cameras here. We're figuring it out, all right? And the reason why, we're still figuring it out is because, when we get to the 100th episode, that's when we're going to unveil that's when we're really going to unveil the pod and, really sort of double down. Up until then, if you are under 100 episodes, you are here and you are early. And let me know if you like these solo episodes that I've been doing. I've really been enjoying it. I've garnered inspiration from some folks that can talk into the mic solo for like an hour. Stephen A. Smith, Colin Cowherd, they're on the sports side, and just diving into different topics. I thought that it would be a really good idea to talk about probably one of my favorite subjects that I continue to talk about on the pod, and I actually think it might be the subject of my next book, which is around status. And this entire pod is breaking down the idea of status. I talked about it at length in my book, The Bold Ones. I talk about it all the time in this podcast because I fundamentally believe that status runs the world. And I think what we should do for this pod, in terms of the thumbnail, is we should call this what I would tell my 20-year-old self. What would I tell my 20-year-old self? Part of the reason why the idea of status is so important, especially for those that are sort of young in their career, is because I really believe that status drives happiness, status drives innovation, status drives the corporate world. And so in this podcast, what I'm going to do is break down dangerous ideas as it applies to status. And part of the reason why I want to do this is I just got off the phone with a young person. She's really ambitious. She wants to make a dent in the universe, and she has this like anxiety. She has this unease around the world that she's not doing enough. And of course, she lives in Toronto. And if you live in Toronto, there's like this general like status anxiety that you're not doing enough, and that somebody's doing more than you. So let me break down why it's important when you are young and when you're old to understand the power of status. Now, before I get into the negative around status, I want to define status. Status is just the idea of feeling valued. It's just about being valued at the end of the day. And status actually can be a source for good. It is part of the reason why we have all these innovations today. It makes sense because we want something that someone else has. Status is the reason why we have all these innovations. Status is the reason why we've created, all these amazing inventions, is because somebody saw something and like, maybe I can do that better. Status can also drive scale. Status can drive scale. What does this mean? If you look at some of the best tech companies in the world and how they've become so successful, they've actually used status as the mechanism to scale. So, for example, Facebook started using emails just for Harvard students. Like when Facebook started, you could only be a Harvard student using your Harvard email to sign up. And what did that do? That drove people, not only within the school, but for people outside of the school, be like, hey, I can only sign up to this new hot thing with a Harvard email. And Harvard obviously is a status symbol. We'll get into Harvard in a little bit. Facebook used status to drive scale. Uber started with black cars in San Francisco. They started with scale. If you look at TikTok and how they scaled, they essentially promoted certain influencers, certain creators, and they gave them an extraordinary amount of clout to start. So other people said, hey, that person made it, maybe I can make it too. In fact, one of the leaders within TikTok, I remember watching an interview of him talking about the idea of TikTok being new land. It's like as if somebody discovered new land. Because if you think about other social media platforms like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, if you think about it as land, it's land that's already conquered. There are creators, there are influencers on those platforms. And if you started anew on those particular platforms, it would take an extraordinary amount of effort because people have already sort of conquered their niche. They've already conquered that land. But when you start something new, when you start a new social network, it's completely new land. So people can flock to it and gain status and gain upward mobility more easily. And it makes sense. When there is something new, you can be the new top dog in that particular field. So when TikTok started, they understood this behavior. And so what they did was they promoted certain creators and influencers like the D'Amelios and others, and they gave them incredible status so that other people saw that and said, I can do that as well. So status can drive scale. And my belief is that status can actually be a good for innovation. It can actually drive innovation. And let me give you one example. Part of the reason why I believe governments have not been able to create an innovation ecosystem is because they don't understand the power of status. In most governments, what they do to drive an innovation ecosystem is they try to create a very democratic process that they try to allocate their funding across, various companies and various startups, and they try to do it in the most democratic way possible. And I believe that this is not how you drive innovation. To me, the best way of creating an innovation ecosystem is to concentrate your stories, your funding, and your power to the sexiest companies that you can. The reason why that is because those companies will rise up, and now other people will point to that organization and say, wow, she did it there. I want to do it too. If you look at how Silicon Valley, how there's been other innovation hubs, it starts with it starts with a group of people coming together, and other people look at that and say, wow, I want to do that too. Silicon Valley is one example. Another example is using the Italian Renaissance. If you look at Michelangelo and Da Vinci, they were the two, some of the best artists of their era. They came together, in Florence, creating some of the best artworks that we've ever seen. And because they've created such incredible work, other people flock to Italy. Other people flock to that region and say, hey, if they did it here, I can do it here too. And so they inspired an entire generation of artists. You can see this example in hip hop. You can see it in the three-point revolution. Steph Curry, changing the game of basketball, shooting threes, created a new marker of how basketball could be played. And of course, other people want to do that too. So the whole idea is that if you want to create an innovation ecosystem, focus on a few sexy examples, and other people will be inspired from it. A lot of people talk about this idea of the Roman triumph, for example. The Roman triumph was this incredible parade. After Rome's military victories, the successful general would parade down the street in spectacular fashion, showcasing all of their spoils of war, gold, exotic animals, rare objects. It was like an incredible parade. They would show off everything in this parade. And I believe one of the reasons why the Romans were so successful and why they wanted to conquer so much land is because of these stupid parades. Can you imagine all these kids that are sitting there and they're watching this general parade down the street? This was the day that bestowed the most status in society to the general. Kids would watch that parade and say, hey, I want to be there. I want that parade. It's like the NBA championship. It's like people watching LeBron parade down the streets. Kids are like, I want that too. I want that success. I want that status. So part of the reason why the Romans were able to conquer land is because they saw the Roman triumph. So if you want to innovate, if you want to conquer new land, take a look at status. So status can be, in some sense, it can be good in some way, right? And we have to recognize that it's created a better world for ourselves. But the other thing is that when it comes to status is to understand sort of the underlying mechanism when it comes to status. One of the books that I read over the last couple of years that has really changed my life is from Luke Burgess called Wanting. And because of that, I actually studied some other work from another guy. He's a philosopher named is Rene Girard, and actually Wanting is based on the work of Rene Girard. Rene Girard is a historian and a philosopher, and he came up with this incredible concept. This concept will change your life. It's this idea of mimetic desire. Mimetic desire is this idea that as human beings, we are constantly getting inspired by others around us. It's the idea that we don't actually come up with our own desires, that we are just modeling the desires of other people. That this is happening subconsciously and consciously, that we are modeling others. It's this idea that, let's say and this happened to me, I was in my friend's basement, whole bunch of kids there, and one kid picked up this yellow truck, and he was like, wow. Another kid came over, he wanted the truck. Another kid came over, and he wanted the truck. My son Dion, he comes over, and he wants the truck. This truck had no value like 5 minutes before, but as soon as somebody put their eyes on it and desired it, it actually created this sort of mimetic desire. It created this idea that other people want this too. And so, great marketers have used mimetic desire in order to get their products out there, or get their products to be desired. A great example is, I believe it was the King of England, one of the kings of England. I got to go back to the research and understand who this was. But at some point, potatoes were not a valued resource. And what the king did was he created a potato garden in the king's yard, and he put security guards around it, and he put a fence around it in order to protect the potato garden. And for some reason, people saw that they were protecting this potato garden, and the king actually purposely unguarded it during the night. And what some of the peasants would do, they would come in and they would steal potatoes from the potato garden, and that spurred a revolution when it came to potatoes. More and more people wanted potatoes. They saw value in it, and it created this explosion of people wanting potatoes. So, an incredible hack of, guarding the potatoes, because the king wanted more people to eat potatoes because there's a great source of nutrition, but yet people didn't want it. And then, because the king was guarding it, it created this desire for the potatoes. Great example. Another example is this cigarette example, where one of the first leaders in the cigarette space wanted to influence other people to smoke. And so what this marketer did was, and I got to get this name. My name is blanking. Hey, can you research cigarette women, cigarette New York? Yeah, Google that. While she Googles it, I will tell you the story. So what this marketer did is, like, in order to influence other women to smoke, what he did was he got a whole bunch of good-looking women going out, like, I think it was like during a parade, and they were smoking, and other women would look at these good-looking women smoking, and were like, hey, like, they seem like they're independent. They seem like they are carefree. I want to do that as well. And so a great example of selling cigarettes to women. I mean, obviously it's not a good thing, but Mimetic Desire. They actually created Mimetic Desire. Somebody saw that these good-looking women were smoking, and they did. Were you able to find it? Yes. Edward Bernays, right? Yeah. Great marketer. And what does the story say, by the way? It used to be social taboo for women to smoke. There you go. Edward Bernays to market to women. And is it Bernays? I think it's Bernays. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Edward Bernays. Absolute GOAT. So use Mimetic Desire to sell cigarettes to women. Incredible hack. So in order to understand status, you have to understand this idea of mimetic desire. Now let's get into what most people think about status. When most people think about status, they think about keeping up with the Joneses, or in modern times, keeping up with Kardashians. And the number one thing you have to know about status is that status is not objective. Status is relative. Wealth is not objective. Wealth is relative. Your status can only be compared to someone else. Like your level of wealth, your title, your seniority can only be compared to someone else. It's not about what you have, it's what you have compared to someone else. That is what drives status. And it's unfortunate because our happiness is driven by status. And I'm not going to lie to you, when I was younger, when I was 20 years old, I was also caught up in status. Part of the reason why I went into accounting, part of the reason why I joined Deloitte in their accounting firm is because of this idea of mimetic desire and because of status. And I didn't know it at the time. It was subconscious. When I was in school and university, I saw people get really great jobs with great status, going into firms like Deloitte that have great status, and maybe subconsciously I'm like, I want that too. I want to show up to this building, to this office wearing a nice suit and having a really nice car, getting a really great brand behind me. And I wasn't even a good accountant, to be honest with you. I wasn't even I shouldn't even have been in accounting in the first place. But I rationalized it because I'm like, oh, this was a great foundation for business. And honestly, it is. But part of the reason why I went in is because of mimetic desire. And by the way, this is what happens in universities. For some reason, when you go to university, everyone has all these ideas of what they want to do in the world. This happens in business. They're like, oh, I want to go to space. I want to go to the moon. I want to do all these things. And when they get into business, what happens is that people want to do like three things. They wanted to get into management consulting. They want to get to iBanking. They want to be in marketing, or they want to be an accountant. I don't know how this happens, but it's mimetic desire because they see other models of people graduating and them getting particular jobs at reputable firms. They're like, hey, I want to do this as well. And I fell into this trap of wanting this. And what's funny is that when I joined the firm, I could see that people's happiness was based on status. One particular example is when I joined the firm, there was like 20 people that joined the firm. And what's interesting is that it's not like everyone got the same amount of money. It's like some people got like $46,000. Somebody got like $44,000. It might have been even less than that, to be honest with you. But people are joining this firm and they're jockeying to how much money they're going to make, right? And it was interesting to see people's happiness decrease if they got $800 less than somebody else for this particular job. Like if you were making $40,000 and somebody was making $39,200 a year, it literally impacted your happiness if you were making that $39,200, because you're comparing your money to somebody else. And to be honest with you, I'm glad I didn't get in this trap, but it's easy to fall into, right? Because if you actually extrapolate and be like, hey, I'm like 22 years old and I'm making $39,000. Like, do you understand? Like, if you want to make like $1 million in your life, that $800 at the start of your career means absolutely nothing. Yet your happiness is based on your relative position next to others. So I saw that very early on. And the reason why this YouTube video or this podcast is for my 20-year-old self is because when you are young, you are trying to, for some reason, you try to optimize for status. You try to optimize for wealth when it does not matter. When you are young and you are 20 years old, what you should be optimizing for is experience. It's using your time to learn as much as possible, because when you are old and frail like me, you don't have time. You have kids, you're married, you got to go to pickleball. You don't have time. So when you are young, use that time to learn. Don't get caught up in the status. Don't get caught up in how much money someone else is making. It's going to impact your happiness. And this idea of keeping up with the Joneses is really it really hurts people, because it really dictates your life in some sort of way. Your anxiety, your status anxiety can cause harm. It can cause unhappiness, that you don't have a better car than someone else, that you don't have a better house than someone else, that you don't have a better position than someone else. And I see this more and more with younger people. And I remember being at the firm and seeing people that were just coming up on the firm, and they wanted to get promoted right away. They wanted this new title right away. And I was really confused as to why they wanted something right away. And part of the reason is because they're seeing other people at other firms or other organizations get better titles than them. So they're comparing themselves to somebody else. It's really dangerous. And I think social media absolutely does not help. Social media is the most status-generating platform that we've ever seen. Because back in the day, you just compared yourself to your neighbor or someone at work. But today, you're comparing yourself to everyone that you're seeing on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on social media. It is amplified by a billion. All right? You're constantly seeing people with nicer cars, nicer homes, nicer whatever compared to you. And you're thinking to yourself, how come I don't have what they have? Because status is relative at the end of the day. And it's funny, because if you want to be happier, you just have to lower your expectations. Let me give you an example. Back in the day, like, if you grew up in the 80s and the 90s and you remember going on an airplane, there used to be like one TV that would come down and like everybody would watch the same. They would just push you a movie. You couldn't choose the movie. They would push you the movie. And if you were right underneath the television, you'd have to like watch it like this. And guess what? They put a crappy Kevin Costner movie on and you would just enjoy it. You would sit there and just enjoy it. They would push you the movie. And today, they literally give you everything at your fingertips. They give you every movie at your fingertips. You have Oscar-nominated movies at your fingertips, and you are so unhappy. You're like tweeting at Air Canada, hey, how come you have no options in terms of movies? This selection sucks. And you were unhappy. Do you know what I'm talking about? You were happy with the Kevin Costner flick that they forced upon you because that was the only option. And when you have all the options on the planet, you are unhappier because your baseline expectation has now risen. So think about this in terms of social media. Back in the day, your baseline expectation was like, my neighbor has a trampoline. Maybe I want a trampoline. And now you look at social media, you go to TikTok, you go to Instagram, go to your Explore page, and not only does everybody have a trampoline, but they have a bigger trampoline, and they got a gold trampoline, and they got it's crazy. It's so unhealthy. And you wonder why social media has really caused mental health to really skyrocket. You wonder why people are so unhappy because we're just comparing ourselves to others all the time. And it's been amplified by social media. And so our baseline expectations have risen so much. Now, on the idea of status, of course, you know, some of the best institutions in the world, they've already recognized that we are hardwired for status. So they turn themselves into status symbols. A great example is universities. Universities and colleges are a giant status symbol. That's what they're good for. They are a badge that you put on your chest that says, I went to Harvard, I went to Stanford, I went to whatever university, and that's a signal to the broader market that I am valued. And this is why there is such an anxiety to get into a good school, because for some reason, not only does that signify that people want that status symbol because they know that organizations they value it. They know that other people value it. So for some reason, people will spend an extraordinary amount of money. People will go in debt to get that status symbol at the end of the day. Now, don't get me wrong. I find that there's a lot of value in universities and colleges. I think it's a great place to learn. I think it's a great place, not learn in terms of like an education like around your course. I think it's a great way to learn about life. I think it's a great place to get laid. I think it's a great place to build a friend. I think it's a great place to learn about deadlines. I think it's a great place to learn about yourself. Let's be honest, the real learning happens when you're actually at work. That's when the real learning starts, okay? It's when you're actually doing something at the end of the day. But universities have turned themselves into status symbols, and really, you're not paying for an education, you're paying for the best status symbol at the end of the day. So it's not only universities. Of course, you have, great luxury companies like LVMH. Yes, they're selling a utility, but really what they're doing is they're selling a dream. They're selling a dream. That handbag has utility, but really it's a dream. And that's what a status is. They're selling a dream. And the best luxury companies in the world, they are doing that. In this pod, we've talked about, the idea of this like to length. So I'm not going to dive deep on it, but this is what great companies do. And listen, I'm not going to lie to you. This is what I've done as well for my career and my brand. I've turned myself into a luxury product. I am a luxury product. That's why if you try to Google me or you YouTube me or you LinkedIn me or you TikTok me or you IG me, You won't see crappy pictures or videos. You won't see something that's on an iPhone. You won't see something that's low quality. Everything is high quality because I want people to see me and say, this is valuable. I am getting value. And by the way, you are. But I want people to say, this is valuable. And this looks too expensive. I don't want to buy this because it's too expensive. And that is actually what I'm trying to do. I am a luxury product. I am a status symbol. So when somebody hires me to speak, I want them to feel like, obviously I want to be approachable, and I am, and I want to be down to earth, but I want people to feel like this is valuable. And that is through compounding, all the videos that you see, they're compounding and they're like, this is really high quality. And so that's a trick. That's a trick. If you've gotten this far on this podcast, it's a trick, by the way. So on the idea of social media, I think what's really remarkable is that status can be virtual, right? Status can be digital. It doesn't have to be physical. And I think a really big societal shift is that a central provider can actually drive scarcity and status, and that can actually create value. So, for example, Instagram gives you a check mark, and well, now you can pay for your check mark, and like, I think they've devalued the check mark in that way, but that check mark means a lot to people. I mean, it used to mean a lot to people, right? If you got a check mark from Instagram or, today, Twitter or TikTok, of course, on Twitter, you can pay for it now, but on TikTok, it's still real. That actually means something. That actually drives value. And if you ask many people, young people, old people, if they don't have a check mark, would you like a check mark? Of course, they would like the check mark. A centralized service a centralized provider has given a random thing like a check mark, and because it's scarce and because they've given it to people with status, it's actually given that check mark value at the end of the day. And so if you look at virtual creating status, you can absolutely do that. That's why, for example, you saw with the NFT craze, you saw with digital objects in the metaverse, you saw with people buying things in Roblox. Like, when something is scarce, it can actually drive, status to that particular thing. Now, don't get me wrong; it can also be precarious, like what you saw with NFTs. Once the entire value of NFTs went down, you saw that it's not as a powerful status symbol as it once was. So, all this to say is that status is a product of our imagination, right? The idea that we can drive value from digital objects or digital things just shows that human beings are just driven by imagination. The other interesting point about status is that another dangerous idea is that we respect the climb more than the peak. We respect the climb more than the peak. What does this mean? We respect someone's trajectory for status more than when they actually have the status. Like, we love when people are chasing something and we give them love and respect, but when they have it, we're more down on it. Do you know what I mean? And the same goes for our happiness. I was just talking about this to a friend, which is a couple friends. One of my friends, he was getting a new pharmacy store, and the chase of getting the store gave him more happiness than actually having the second store. Do you know what I mean? Like, his goal was to get the second store. He got the store, but he had more happiness chasing the store. And it's not like he has a decreased level of happiness with the store. He is very happy with the store, but he was more happy getting it. The same thing with my friend who just had a gym. His name is Kenny. He's a trainer, really great kid, and he went from his basement to actually owning his own gym. Really cool. Went from the basement to the second floor, which is really cool. And I asked him, I was like, are you happy? Were you happier chasing the gym than you were having the gym? He's like, absolutely. And of course, now he's chasing more things, and it's the idea that we respect the climb more than the peak. And this goes to my next point, and I talked about this in the bold ones, which is this idea of backsliding in status is probably the thing that we hate the most in society. Like backsliding in status, backsliding in your title, backsliding in your house, backsliding in your wealth is something that we hate the most. Like we would rather be number 30 going to number 15 than going from number 1 to number 2. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's say you play tennis. You are ranked number 1. But next year, you're ranked number 2. And give another example of somebody that's ranked number 30 that goes to number 15. Who's happier? Now, the number 15 is still worse than number 2, yet because you went from number 2, because you backslid, you are way less happy, even though you're a better tennis player than the person that's number 15. Do you know what I mean? And so backsliding in society is one of the things that we hate the most. We don't want to appear to lose status. And that's just hardwired in our DNA. I don't know why it is, but it is. So getting demoted from a job, losing a particular position, getting fired, losing followers, losing your check mark, losing your position as the top dog. These are things that are, can really hurt. And so we try our best to avoid backsliding in society. And I'll talk about why actually I think it's a good thing to actually consciously try to backslide. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so another piece that I want to mention when it comes to status is this piece that I talk about, costly signaling. I talk a lot about it, but it's the idea that costly signaling is this idea that by putting in extraordinary effort, that it can result in greater meaning and value at the end of the day. By putting in more effort, it can result in greater meaning and value. And it's this idea that by, it's actually using status for good. Like, getting a handwritten note versus a text message. We know that the handwritten note is it's just going to land a little bit deeper, right? Putting a lot of production into a podcast studio, into the mic, into the audio, people just recognize the effort. And I think that's one of the interesting parts of status is that status inherently should be hard. Like it should be hard to get because it wouldn't be valuable if it wasn't hard to get. Now, that doesn't apply to everything, but same thing with costly signaling is that costly signaling is this idea that, by putting in effort, it results in greater value and meaning at the end of the day. And the same thing with status, right? And so you can use costly signaling as a tool to create more meaningful and magical experiences with customers, with clients, with stakeholders, with your audience. I think it's a powerful tool. And it just shows that by, if I went and I wanted to get your business, me flying all the way to New York and sitting down with you, taking you out for lunch, that's going to translate more than me getting in out of my house, jumping on a Zoom in my sweatpants. Putting in that extraordinary effort will show greater value and meaning and significance, and you're probably going to win that business. So I love that idea of costly signaling. Now, one of the things that I wrote in my book, The Bold Ones, was this idea of the dark side of the cult and status. It's funny because one of the things that in order to be in order to be successful on social media, for example, you have to like garner status. You have to get followers, you have to get likes, you have to get views. It is a mark of status. And you also have to recognize that there's a downfall to status, right? There could be a downside to the cult. If you start to believe your own shit, if you start to be a slave to the algorithm or a slave to the amount of followers that you have, then you start to believe your own shit. You start to, and this is why I think, Kanye had a downfall. This is why I believe that Sam Bankman-Fried had a downfall, that you start to believe your own shit. And that's why it's good to have advisors around you to say, hey, you're not high in status. That's why I believe in the idea of, and I don't know how true this is, but when there was the Roman triumph and the general would be parading down the street in spectacular fashion, it has been said that at the back of the chariot there would be a slave, and the sole job of the slave would be to whisper in the ear of the general, memento mori. It's to say to the general, remember you will die. It's to remind the general that even though this is the day that bestowed the most status in society to you, that you should remind yourself that you're just a mortal. That remind yourself that tomorrow is not promised. And I think that's a great reminder because that helps you avoid the cult, that avoids you, that gives you, it reminds you to stay humble at the end of the day. So avoid the dark side of the cult. Now, let me get into some tactics of how to avoid status, all right? One of the things that I wrote about in my book was the idea of avoiding the Russell Westbrook trap. It's the idea, and actually doesn't apply, and what's crazy is that if I wrote the book today, I would actually say that Russell Westbrook, who's a basketball player, he's now on the Los Angeles Clippers. He's gone from team to team to team over the last number of years. He's actually been an amazing example of somebody that has turned the corner, because he used to be a guy that was really selfish. He didn't want to change his game. He didn't want to come off the bench. He didn't want to do the things that made him he didn't want to do the things where the game was changing. And now he's somebody that is willing to come off the bench. He is somebody that is willing to take a lower status situation. So I guess instead of saying avoiding the Russell Westbrook trap, I would say embrace the Russell Westbrook new leaf, essentially, because Russell Westbrook is now willing to come off the bench. And I believe that in practice, it's amazing to always place yourself in lower status situations, right? Lower status than you. And I know status is obviously an ugly word, but like get the coffee, do the meeting minutes, come off the bench, help out, lift what you ever need to do, do whatever you need to do and put yourself in those situations, because it's just like constantly humbling yourself. And it's one of the ways of essentially backsliding in status in sort of small ways. The other way of avoiding the status trap is to actually detach yourself from formal accreditations. Now, I know this is really blasphemous, but if you got, for example, your CA, your MBA, your CFA, don't put it next to your name. Don't put that next to your name. Detach yourself from those formal accreditations, because to be honest with you, you don't need. Why are you using those designations to define who you are? The people that hire you at the end of the day, they'll look at your resume, they'll look at your CV. But so many of us define ourselves by the credentials, right? They define ourselves by an MBA or whatever it might be. So detach yourself from those formal accreditations and, define yourself by, why you exist, not like by the school that you went to or the designation that you got. That's a radical take. And, but I really believe that by doing that, it will help you be yourself. I have my CA. I don't put my CA beside my name because I want my name to represent, I want Shawn Kanungo to represent what I wanted to represent: innovation, disruption, etc. So that's one way of avoiding this status trap. Another way of avoiding the status trap is to be comfortable with shifting your identity. Part of the reason why it becomes so difficult to innovate, or it becomes so difficult to almost disrupt ourselves, is because we attach ourselves to a particular identity. Like, I attach myself to the idea of becoming a mortgage broker. I attach myself as being a doctor, or I attach myself to being a partner. I attach myself to being a senior manager. Once you start identifying yourself to those status markers, once you lose it, it's going to be devastating, right? If you attach yourself to being the GOAT of something and you're no longer the GOAT, that's going to be a huge blow. And so one of the ways of detaching yourself from status is actually being able to assume different identities. So, for example, many people know me as a keynote speaker, right? And right now, I am hot right now. I am on the circuit. I'm one of the busiest speakers on the planet. But I am not attaching myself to being a speaker. That's why I'm starting new paths. Like, I'm starting to be a podcaster. I'm starting to be a content creator. I'm starting to be a producer. I'm starting to be in the media business. I'm starting to be an author. Like, I'm starting new ventures so that when I'm not regarded as one of the best speakers on the planet, then I can shift to other identities. And I think part of the way of being happy is to not attach yourself to a particular identity. This is one way to avoid the status trap. The other way to avoid the status trap is to understand the traps that you're actually in. In one of my earlier episodes, I talked to one of my friends, Rahul Bhatia. He openly admitted that he's in the expensive watch trap, which I totally respect. I know my other friends are into like the sneaker trap. I know some friends are into the car trap. Like, people are into certain status traps, and I think that's fine. It's the trap that you want to be in. You're in the investment banking trap. You're in the luxury streetwear trap. Whatever trap you're in, God bless you. But remember that they are traps, and take a step back and recognize that you are in a trap. I think one of the ways of staying out of traps is to live your life modestly, right? And I look at myself. Listen, I'm not somebody that drives value for my car. I drive like a Toyota Highlander and a Toyota Sienna, okay? A van and an SUV. I got car seats in the back. They're dirty, and they're not status traps. They're not status symbols at all. I live in a very modest house. I don't wear, like, I shop at Uniqlo and H&M. I'm trying to live modestly. I'm trying not to signal to the world that I am, I'm bigger than I am, because I'm already somebody already puts me on a pedestal, right? I'm already, like, when I'm speaking somewhere, they literally read my bio before I come on. So I'm already at a place of authority, right? I remember my friend was asking me, he got a new car. And he got a Mitsubishi. I think it's a Mitsubishi. I don't even know. I don't know anything about cars, right? So anyways, he got a Mitsubishi. And he said, we could have afforded to get a luxury car, but we opted to get this Mitsubishi. Part of the reason is because, I think part of the reason is because I was in his ear. I was like, you're not going to be happy with this luxury car, okay? It's going to be, you're gonna drive it once and it's going to be great. And then after that, you'd be like, why do I have this? I have like 2 kids. Like, why is this valuable at the end of the day? And he asked me the question, don't you feel pressure to have a nice car because people put you on a pedestal and they're like, if people see you in a shitty car, which I do have a shitty car or shitty cars, people will be like, why is he driving a crappy car? And what I told him was that my status, I already have status because of my knowledge, of my experience, of, people already put me on a pedestal in another way. So I'm actually trying to detach myself from status. So for me to have not a nice car or not a nice house or not a nice clothes or whatever, like that's a way for me to detach from the status that's already bestowed upon me. I don't need to flex on people, right? Because somebody's already flexing for me. Do you know what I mean? But listen, I have other friends that are, for example, in commercial real estate, and they need a nice car. They need a nice car because they show up to places and people are looking at their cars and they are associating that real estate agent or broker to that car. And part of the reason is because sometimes those clients come in the car. And to be honest with you, if somebody would come in my car often that I don't know that's a client, I would actually probably get a better car. Because to me, that's respect. That's costly signaling at the end of the day. It's by putting in greater effort, it shows greater meaning and significance. So listen, if I had a different job, I might have a different car. So all this to say, don't get caught up in the status trap. Live your life modestly. Don't compare yourself to others because you're going to be put into a trap. And it doesn't get better. The richer you get, the more you're just going to compare yourself to somebody else, right? Right. It's all relative at the end of the day. And that's why they say that, even the richest people on the planet are still unhappy because they're comparing themselves to other rich people. So if you want to increase your happiness, just lower your expectations or lower your status. I think it is actually a good thing to lower your status. I think it's a good thing to practice lowering your status, whether it's coming off the bench, whether it's assuming a different position, whether it is driving a bad car, whether it is, I don't know, working a day at 7-Eleven. Like, I think it's good to lower your status once in a while, because when it does happen, and it will happen to everyone, it's not going to be such a huge blow. Like I said before, backsliding in status is one of the most hurtful things as a human being, right? Because we're comparing ourselves to others. I talk about the idea in my book, which I think is the most powerful part in my book, is this idea of going from 100 to 0. Because everybody wants to go from 0 to 100. And I talked about it. The climb is really sexy. That's where we get our most happiness, is from 0 to 100. But going from 100 to 0, disrupting yourself, going down in status, disrupting your status, it's the most challenging thing to do, and it's the most rewarding thing that you can do. Because once you can backslide in status and not feel any way around it, then you can do so many things. It will allow you to reach new mountaintops. It will allow you to try new things. Part of the reason why people don't want to try new things is because they don't want to backslide in status. Part of the reason people don't want to create content is because they're afraid of putting something out and no one will see it. No one will like it. They will get no views. Guess what? It's the truth. Look at the number look at this number of people that are watching this video. Like, it's you and me basically right now, right? Do you think I care about that? No, because I am not only am I in service to you who is watching this, but at the end of the day, it is a new realm for me. It's a new world for me. This is a new land for me at the end of the day. And I am trying to garner status on this particular platform. I am. So it's funny because we're all hardwired for status, but we have to recognize at the end of the day, part of the reason why we're unhappy is because of status. I'm rambling. But okay. The other way of, I guess, using status for good is sharing status and recognition with others. Like, giving people status, giving people credit is one way of giving people happiness. Do you know what I mean? So one of the things that I did during the pandemic, during my keynotes, is I used to get moderators to come and join me in the theater, like at the Meyer Horowitz Theater or the Trifo Theater. These are huge theaters. absolutely beautiful, epic theaters. I used to invite people out during the pandemic. And guess what? I got like 100% acceptance rate because I'm giving people a platform. I'm recognizing their friendship or their value. I'm giving them this amazing opportunity. And people found a lot of value out of it because I'm sharing my status with them. I'm literally bringing them on stage with me at this huge thing. And that's sharing status. And I think one of the ways of sharing status internally within an organization is share status to people that are failing. Give people credit and give them upward mobility when they have a failure, but they learn something from it. That way, you're actually promoting people to take shots. You're actually promoting people to take experiments. And I think this is a really interesting hack of how you can use status in a positive way. Another way of elegantly using status is give people credit or status on projects that they're not involved with, just so that they join your journey. You know, part of the reason why people don't accept new ideas or new ways of doing things is because they don't understand it, or they may not get credit or status from it. But if you can give people credit or status on projects that they're not involved with, they're way more willing to support that. So share your status and recognition as much as you can. So all this to say, I want to go back to the beginning of why I talked about this. This is for my 20-year-old self. And I remember I'm a advisor to this student consulting group at the University of Alberta. I'm on the board. It's like the best board that I've ever been on. It's like being on the OpenAI board. It's like doing as little work as possible and just like meeting with people once in a while. I'm on this board. I remember being on this board and I'm meeting with a group of students, all in their very early 20s. And I said, you guys are just graduating. What do you guys want? And around the table, it was like money, it was title, it was great company. And I'm like, you automatically have, I don't know why university does that. You're automatically in the same trap that I was in when I was in my 20s, which was I was trying to optimize for these things. And now as I'm, 20 years older, I can tell you that those things don't matter. Okay. What matters is actually the people that you meet, the people that you connect with, building your own brand equity, building your learning, your achievements, getting punched in the face every single day, and just experimenting and playing and exploring, especially when you're young, because when you get older, you don't have time. Don't get caught up in the status trap. This is something that I can talk about at length for, something that I want to continue to write about. If you have other ideas when it comes to status, dangerous ideas, let me know. I'm going to explore it in this pod. So if you've gotten this far, I want to say thank you. I want you to rate, review, and subscribe to this pod. And I will catch you next time on Dangerous Ideas. See ya.